Hi, beautiful souls. This is Sadhana. Welcome to my channel. Today is going to be a little bit of a show and tell and also a little bit of sharing how I work with Pip and Marseille decks and how I use them, who I use them with, how I read them. I'll also talk a little bit about each of the decks that I'm sharing. Those that are more familiar, I'll spend less time on, and then the ones that are I haven't seen too much of on YouTube, I'll talk a little more about those. I'm going to briefly address the White Sage. So I have done several videos on this deck, but we will talk about the White Sage Tarot. This is the Tarot de Maria Celia, which is a really kind of cute, cartoony Marseille deck. I have two copies of the Trionfi della Luna, this one, the classic and the paradoxical, but we'll have a look at the classic deck today. Marshmallow Marseille, which is you've seen a lot of on YouTube, so we'll very briefly touch on that one. The Tarot Days OR, which is a favorite of many just for its beautiful, colorful cards. We'll have a quick look at that. I've talked a lot about Lilywhite, but I've never talked about this deck as a Pip deck. So we'll have a look at that and just the different ways, possible ways of reading that. Lauren Aletta's deck. So this is the Lumina Tarot. We're going to have a look at that as a Pip deck and how you could read that, you know, different kind of ways of reading and working with that deck. And we're going to start today with the Labyrinth Tarot. This particular copy I bought through eBay. The publisher is Fournier out of Spain. I believe it was originally published by Los Scarabeo. This is slightly smaller than a standard tarot deck, so slightly smaller than a Los Scarabeo deck. Really nice quality cards. But before I start that, and it does come with a little white multilingual book, and it was a very reasonable price. In learning about the deck, I found out about this book, which is really very, very special. So I was able to find this used book through a used bookseller about this tarot, and it really has given me a much deeper appreciation for Louis Royo's project. And just let me move the candle out of the way here. In this book, you get to have a look at the cards in, there's also extra artwork in this book, which is amazing. I want to show you this photo. This is so cool. See if we can zoom in here. So there's extra art in this book, and I'm not sure what year this book was published because there's no publishing date on the opposite page here. So I'll back up again. So there's a few different extra pieces of art and a beautiful introduction. This is a gorgeous painting here. We have all these symbols on the stairs. About this project, and one of the things about this deck is that it is just full of symbolism, much like a Thoth deck, but that is not the intention of this deck. This deck is intended to kind of allow the myriad of symbolism just to kind of emerge as it is needed, if that makes sense. This book gives you a large, so this is about an 8.5 by 11 standard letter size piece of paper, maybe slightly smaller. So you get this huge picture here, which is really nice because the images on the cards are very, very small. The majors are all in sepia tones, and then we'll have a look at the cards. The cards are color-coded by suit. All right, let's have a look at the cards. Beautiful card backs. They really match the deck well. I find sometimes card backs and what's on the other side don't necessarily go together, but this is just a perfect symbiosis of the front and the back. Love the bronze color, and I definitely will be edging these in either bronze or black. Small deck, so slightly smaller than a standard tarot deck, so super easy to riffle shuffle, which I really, really appreciate. The minors are color-coded, and here we have the wands, and the wands are green, which is really kind of unusual color for me to work with for wands. So there's different places you can go with your interpretations and if you just allow this deck to reveal itself, there's so much symbology and mythology blended together. It will reveal itself over time. The reason I initially was attracted to this deck is when I was scanning the internet for a deck to use with past life readings, this deck really caught my attention. I was looking for a deck that crossed cultures and was timeless. And I think it's really important that when you're doing past life readings that you create that opportunity. So there's no attachment to, that need to want to know, like, oh, who was I? Where was I? What culture was I in? And that kind of thing. And this deck really, it does a really good job of evoking passion. These are the cups, which are red, which is very, very different for a suit of cups. And you get that. I think of all the suits, this one really is evocative. The sepia tones also, in the majors, create that sense of transcending time. And like I said, so these are really small images. And so having that extra reference to go to the larger cards is really important. And on each of these cards, I'm just going to read from the larger book here. Tarot is a philosophical tool linked to astrology, Kabbalah, alchemy, and magic, which therefore means holds the key to first-rate occultist wisdom. In each image, as well as in the accompanying text, appear the astrological sign, its equivalent in the Hebrew alphabet, and corresponding number. Their meanings derived from each of them must be sought in the different related sources whose sheer extent makes them impossible to go through here. Similarly, the links to different mythologies are merely suggested, and it is necessary to adapt the references to the actions and the meanings and the archetypes. And I think that's beautifully expressed. So this gives you an opportunity to allow the story to unfold. And if you're doing a past life reading with other decks surrounding this, then that really, or of course, if you're reading it intuitively, allows that kind of energy to flow forth. So for example, here we have the Three of Pentacles, and you have this option to read this numerologically. You can bring in the astrological associations. You can read this as you would a straight up Rider-Waite-Smith, or you can blend all of your knowledge together. And in both the Little White Book and the extended larger book, he addresses that. And we do not have a Marseille deck here. We have a Pip deck that is open and fluid. When I'm looking at this upside down in the camera as I'm sharing it with you, I see something completely different. And I'm just going to turn this over for you. I see this face with two eyes, a mouth, and a mustache. And maybe in a reading, I might have my vision slightly blurred and something might come forth, an actual, figure from the queerance past or something like that. So I thought this is a really important deck to share with you. It's still available if you dig deep and hard, and do a bit of research, because I'll show the size of these pictures when I pull out some other decks just to show you how small they are. But they're really kind of mysterious, and I don't know, I think it's a very, very special deck. So how do I read? I read with a real blend of everything. And here I see we've got the Ten of Wands, which is associated with, a burden. We have two these look like really painful weapons here. My God, I would hate to get whacked with one of those. So we're at the culmination of this super passionate, energetic suit, but this green color is really kind of speaking to me here. So I want to go into the heart and the heart chakra and the pain of the heart and grief. And that might come forward for me at this time. But I might just speak to the resolution of all that the suit of wands represents. And so just allowing the reading to flow through is, I find, the best way to work with the deck. And why has he decided to stick a flower here in the middle of the Four of Wands? And in one reading, I might completely overlook that, and in another, that might come forward. And here we have the base of each of the wands coming together, and we have the more, the more painful end of the wand away, moving away. And so I really allow the pictures to speak and to, to say what they need to say. The other thing about this deck is that the pages are called jacks, which is kind of unique and interesting. So that's the Labyrinth Tarot by Royo, and I'm sorry if that's not how you say his name. I'm just going to go to Lilywhite because it's sitting here right beside me, and I know I have spoken about this deck many, many times. This is another example of a deck where you have options. So here we have the Knight of Earth, and because we have Earth, we have a female body for the Knight. We have the symbol of Earth here. We have the Pentacles here. And we also have this vine that looks very much like a snake. You could speak to that as well, too. But I want to get to the pips because I think this is truly a pip deck. And if you wanted to read this deck numerologically, you definitely could. Because here we have the Seven of Pentacles, which, if you're reading it more Rider-Waite-Smith, speaks to patience. And one of the things here, if you notice, this flower has gone to seed. And so you might want to bring in, what that means to you, like the blowing of the dandelion, the wishes, here we have the, kind of like the alpha and the omega. And so for me, reading a pip deck it's more about just allowing whatever needs to come forth to come forth. This is kind of an unusual 10 of Swords. The sword that is piercing the crown chakra, one of them is piercing it through, one of them is bent, one of them has been destroyed in the actual piercing of the crown chakra. What does the piercing of the crown chakra have to do with the 10 of Swords? And that may or may not be brought into the reading. Here we have more of a Rider-Waite-Smith kind of image where we have the eagle surrounded by the swords. So, you have options here. Here you have your ace. In this one, the ace and the 10 really are very, very pippish. So this is the alpha and the 10 is the omega, where this whole plant has grown, and we have the 10 coins above the earth. Let me give you another example. So here's your 10, right? So that same coin is in the earth, and this all has come forth as a result of the work that you have done in the Suit of Pentacles. And in the Five of Wands, we don't see a battle ensuing. We have this fox that has been confined by these 5 wands. And what does that represent? So how are you going to read this card? Are you going to read it numerologically? Are you going to read it through the elemental references? And so in simplifying the pips and having less illustration, I think it expands, it gives you much, much more possibility of how you're going to read the card. And the numerology in the, or the reference to numbers, I should say, not necessarily numerology, in the court cards. So the court cards, sorry, my camera stopped recording. The court cards, so here we have the Suit of Swords, the Suit of Air, and so we have an incense stick. So we have 1 incense stick for the page and 4 for the kings. So there's lots of symbols in this deck that you can work with and pick up on. And it's a super pippish deck. Here we have the 5 of Cups, and we have life arising. new life. Almost, this is like the lotus coming out of the mud. So here we have the broken cups representing kind of the mud, and the lotus coming up through the 2 cups. So it's just really beautiful, and there's so many different ways that you can read the minors when there are fewer illustrations. And I think this is one of my favorite kind of decks because of that. So let's go to Lauren's deck. So I believe in her guidebook, I have it right beside me, I'm just going to double check that she, in her descriptions, uses the more of a Rider-Waite-Smith description. So here we have the 7 of Wands. So for me, 7 of Wands is a very kind of defensive card. If we're looking at Rider-Waite-Smith, let's have a sip of my coffee. Sometimes we need to create that wall. We need to create that barrier. We might need a break. We might need to create, you know, some space between us and the others. There's also a sense of defensiveness and protection that may be completely necessary. Also, there's an element of strength. So here we can also look to the animal symbolism, and there's a lot of animals in this deck. And these are all kind of, you know, running straight forth. The one that's going straight through the center also has a crystal at the tip. In her guidebook, she says, back yourself and be the light. You may have found yourself in a position where you're being called to back yourself and trust your own inner source of light. Your passion and resolve are being tested, and despite feeling uncertain, you welcome the occasion. You can feel the energy and vitality of what you stand for and represent burning within you. You're being called to stand tall. So the wands standing upright has that sense of standing tall and proud. Light the way for others. Trust in yourself and your vision. So even though this is not highly illustrated, she's using a very Rider-Waite-Smith kind of description for the cards. However, because the illustrations are they're certainly not simpler. Simpler is just not the right word, because these are anything but simple. It just gives you a sense of more options, which is really, really beautiful. And I appreciate that in a deck. I love the 6 of Swords because the light in the sky through the stars and the shifting color of the sky really gives that sense of hopefulness in moving forward and leaving the swords behind. And the swords here are kind of connected in and among the trees, and they're standing tall and proud, showing that what you are leaving behind, you know, has that sense of like you're not running away in this deck. And sorry, you're not running away in this card. And that's kind of, I read the 6 of Swords a little different than I would in another deck. Yeah. And this 8 of Cups is very similar to a few other, like I think I might pull this aside, White Sage. You know, like the leaving is not easy. You might have to jump over a few things. I love the way this is drawn, right? It kind of shows that it is time to move forth. However, you know, those first few steps are going to be a little difficult. Yeah, so here we go. There's another sword card. Here's your 9 of Wands, and look at that passion and energy here. In the Labyrinth, this was the color for the Suit of Cups. And so if you kind of associate red with passion, or perhaps with root chakra, with blood, with, you know, there's endless ways and possibilities. Also here we have the upward facing triangle, right, for fire. So there's all these different kind of levels that you can go to. And even a lot of the majors are much more simple, you know, not fully illustrated. And look at this beautiful 2 of Pentacles. Like, this looks very Marseille-esque. And so why does, in her guidebook, why does she stick so closely to Rider-Waite-Smith descriptions when this is not really an RWS deck at all? And so this deck, I think, gives you a lot of freedom in how it is read. And she also includes astrological symbols on her card. So yeah, so this is the Lumina Tarot by Lauren Aletta. And look here, the Seven of Swords are in the setting sun. And this is so cool. I'm going to pull that one to the side too. So I'm just going to grab White Sage. Okay, so this is the indie version of the White Sage. I also have the US Games version in a tin. This one is just slightly larger. And this one has the borders at the bottom are a little bigger, but basically it's the same deck. What I wanted to look for was the Seven of Swords and the Eight of Cups. And I might have another deck in mind. Sometimes I get my decks all confused. So let's have a look at the pips here. So the wands are pussy willows. And so all you get is a pussy willow, and then you get a ribbon to bring in the element of the chakras. If you're familiar with the medicine of the chakras, it's really helpful in seeing what needs to be brought into the reading. So pink represents the root chakra. Okay, so, and also in this deck, we have a lot of different symbology from several different cultures. And she brings in quite a bit of Egyptian symbology in this deck too. Right, so a really simple Ace of Swords, again, root chakra. Okay, for the suit of Pentacles, we have sand dollars. And here in the Five of Pentacles, the ribbon, the pink ribbon, has broken the central sand dollar. Now, sand dollars are quite fragile. They're easy to break. But for some reason, the root chakra, so this is about survival, basic instincts, has broken the largest sand dollar. And so it is, for me, a lot easier to read than the image of the people in front of the church. Broken legs, winter, coldness, poverty. This is a way more flexible kind of energy to read. Here we have yellow, we have Manipura chakra, we have all of the teachings associated with the solar plexus chakra, and we have 8 of Pentacles perfectly lined up side to side. They look balanced, they look strong, they look to be a little bit thicker than the other ones. And so we really have a sense of confidence here. And for me, the Eight of Pentacles is about that. There is definitely a sense of confidence where we're kind of going back to something that we're digging a little deeper, something within our life path that needs to come forth at this time, and we're allowing that to shine. And I love the sense of confidence in this card. And here we have the 6, which looks a little bit Rider-Waite-ish, having the balance here. And we don't have the sense of giving and receiving that we see in a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, but we have the Manipura, the gold, wrapped around this bar that's in the center. So the center of the scale is wrapped with this kind of color representing power and will and free will. And this is not out of balance. And so I think that's really important to bring into this, because a lot of times with this card, this particular card, if you're looking at how it has been illustrated, you need to see where the sense of power lies, right? And the reason for the giving or the reason for the receiving. And this just leaves it a lot more open-ended. But there is a sense of balance here, which is interesting. Yeah, and so the cups are cups. And here we have heart chakra around the 2 of Wands. So this is really kind of speaking to listening to your heart to, to find whatever the solution is that you need to move forward. Simple, right? It's a lot easier for me than having a globe, somebody looking away in the distance, and the two wands. So that's one of the reasons why I really, really appreciate this deck. So yeah, then we go to a more Marseille style deck. So I have Marshmallow Marseille and the Tarot des OR, Trionfe della Luna, Tarot de Maria Celia. And why would I pick up one of these as opposed to the other 4 decks that we've already looked at? And it might depend on which oracle deck that I want to use. It might depend on the season, the mood. I mean, I think all of Patrick's decks work really well in the fall and around Samhain and things like that. Some people like to use them all year round, but I think this is a seasonal kind of deck. This deck reminds me a little bit of the Happy Tarot, right? It's very cartoony, and it has just the colorations of the cards brings in a sense of lightness. The Tarot des OR is super passionate, right? It's got lots of red, but at the same time, it's really earthy. So if I need to do a reading for somebody who feels a lot of disconnect with the root chakra, with, survival, and it's really interesting. I did a reading the other day, and I was about to light a candle and do some smudging, and she said, "Is the candle scented?" And I said, "Yes." And so I put it away because apparently she can't have any scents around. And so I started to offer some teachings about that, and that the sense of smell is connected to the root chakra. And so from there, that's how I chose my deck. My deck was a deck that was going to really speak to the root chakra through color and imagery. And I feel that this deck, even though it's a Marseille or a Marseille style deck, does a really good job with that. So yeah, so people often ask, like, why do you use a certain deck with a certain client? And so that's why, even if they don't have a particular question, and you have a little bit of chit chat at the beginning, and you allow they kind of reveal themselves. And if you are an experienced reader, you can then, and you have a selection of decks with you, then you can choose a more appropriate deck. And for me, this is a very, very earthy deck. So I might use this with one of the more shamanic style oracle decks that I have. Or I might let this just speak on its own because it's just so full of life and color and light. I really, really appreciate this deck. The other thing too, and even with the Tarot de Marseille or Tarot de Marseille style decks, I think it's really important that you allow the subtleness of the extra art to come through as well too. Like in this 6 of Cups here, we have this beautiful, these roses are growing up through these 2 balanced rows of cups. And like I said before with other decks, if you blur your vision a little bit and allow your focus to go where it needs to go, your focus might go right here, or you might simply be speaking to the 6. So the 6 is harmony, right? It's beauty. It's the center of the tree of life. It's the most beautiful place, right? It's where the flower is. This is the heart chakra. This is the place of the balance of the lower 3 chakras and the upper 3 chakras. It's just this place of beauty. So if you have that kind of information, you can go there. But you don't need to have that information. You can just simply speak to whatever the number 6 represents for you. Or if you only read, or you only have experience, I should say, in reading Rider-Waite, and this is your first Marseille deck, well, maybe you're going to speak to nostalgia, right? Maybe you're going to speak to whatever that represents and somebody from the past coming into your life, or maybe you're going to talk about family reunions or class reunions. You know, you have that freedom. I don't think you need to feel stuck to read Tarot de Marseille as a numerological deck. And I think in Tom Benjamin's book, Tarot on Earth, he addresses that really well. It's important for you to develop your own reading style and to see what you see in the pictures, because it's going to be different every single time. And with more experience, you will, and more experience with each deck that you have, more things are going to come forth for you. And it's going to be a lot easier. This Two of Cups is just, look at it. I'm going to turn it upside down for you too, so you can see it in a different way. There is so much growth here. And one of the things looking at this card for me is that this cup is the foundation of the upper cup. And if we're looking at lovers, if we're looking at relationships, they're perfectly balanced and supporting one another. And does it matter if you are here and I am there, or you are there and I am here? You know, like, it's, for me, that sense of them being one on top of each other is about, you know, it brings in the concept of balance, but also that, you know, this is interchangeable where each of those cups is positioned. So yeah, so this is a really, oh, I love the twos. The twos in this deck are just amazing. Okay, so that's Tarot des Zohar. So that's why I might choose that one. Okay, I said I might choose the Trionfi della Luna in around the time of Samhain. I'm sure you've seen this deck, but just in case you haven't. So it looks very much like the Deviant Moon. So on the majors, we have these kind of freakish, scary, unusual, kind of like from a bad dream, a bad nightmare. Very pointy fingers looking up towards the star, and all kinds of deviations in her body created from the insect, the fish. The High Priestess is looking straight at you. I think Patrick has done a really good job with body positions in this deck too, so you can really use facings well. And then the pips do look very much like a Tarot de Marseille, so you can read this as a straight up Tarot de Marseille, or you can take in the subtle changes that Patrick has made with this deck and read them that way, depending on which way this card turns up. Like, which way is the blood dripping? What does the blood represent for you? Does the blood represent the root chakra, or does it represent the heart chakra? Because it represents both. And that is, I think those are really important things to bring in. Or, you know, this is the Ten of Swords, you know, the end. It is the end of the Suit of Swords. And so in that end with the battle of the mind, what is the result of the end of the battle with the mind? And kind of just letting go of that. So you might not speak to the blood at all. And because this is kind of, these colors are very, very muted. You know, this works really well with any kind of tea-stained oracle deck. And I would definitely use another floral deck when I'm working with this deck. I think I paired it with Oracle of Oddities in one of my videos, but another botanical deck would work really, really well to kind of bring out the energy of the plants. I love the way he's drawn the plants. Right, they're all kind of growing out of control and toxic, and they look kind of toxic and dangerous. And here we have the Seven of Cups, which speaks to decisions, but you might not, you know, in the RWS, right? We look at delusion and, you know, hurry up, you've got to make a decision, pick one. But here, you know, we're looking at sevens, which represent, you know, self-reflection and introspection and reflection, which is brought into the RWS, but it is what do I want to say? It doesn't seem so needy. The RWS image looks a little needy to me, a little self-possessed. So more to the negative side of the card. So you can look at sevens in general, or you may have other associations with sevens that are coming forth for you at this time. And then look at we have a 3, and a 1. Well, 3 cannot balance on 1. So, and why is this 1 in the center? Like, is this the solution? And what is the solution? Like, just allow yourself to flow with the deck. So yeah, this deck, you definitely, like, it doesn't have to be read at Samhain. It doesn't have to be used at Samhain. It can be used any time of the year. And with another botanical deck, I think it allows things to come forth that otherwise wouldn't come forth. Now, these two decks are quite similar. So let's have a look at Mareille, Celia, and Marshmallow. So you can see the difference in the colors. And these are the last two that we're going to look at today. I've decided to regroup here. I'm going to show you the Mareille, Celia, and the Marshmallow and do a side-by-side in order through both decks in the next video. But there's a couple of thoughts here I just wanted to use to complete this video. I was talking about the plant growth in between the cups, or any of the elements, the pentacles or the swords or the baton. There's messages and there's subtle differences in all of these decks that is kind of really important and may help you in reading the cards. So for example, in the Triomphe della Luna and the Mareille, Celia, the growth is coming from this central bottom cup. And that may perhaps be connected to the card that is down here, connected. And that might help you reach your decision. It may also, because like in this card, it's quite open and the energy is pointing toward perhaps the card that's up here. So perhaps your answer is up here. And so I definitely do use the plants as clues, and much like I do with facings with people in the cards, to help find a solution. On this card here, the central cup is completely encircled. Perhaps it's going to be strangled, so this is definitely not the answer to the solution, but perhaps it is. Maybe this is pointing out something, very central in the central cup here. But yeah, I really kind of listen to that. And like I said, sometimes just the numerology makes sense, or there's something intuitively that comes forth. There's a lot of really interesting gold energy behind all of these cups. And, that might be an important message. Something else that arose when I was watching the playback was that I was seeing in this deck the three-dimensionality of the images, and that it looked to me more like, rather than these cups being on top of each other, they were across the table from each other. And it just occurred to me that perhaps that was a message in itself, rather than being either on top or on bottom, that they were across from each other. And you'll notice in different Marseille style decks, sometimes the cups are across from each other. Sometimes there is something dividing. There's something divisive between the cups. But here we have this dragon intertwined around this central plant energy. And this is pretty powerful, even though it's, kind of it's not a gentle, loving energy. It is a Triomphe della Luna, but there's some coming together here for sure in the symbology of the plants itself. So it's not just the Two of Cups that, you're deriving that from. I also mentioned that the Eight of Cups in the Lumina Tarot was reminding me of another deck, and I think I said White Sage, but it's not White Sage at all. It is Lilywhite. So very similar kind of imagery for the Eight of Cups in both the Lilywhite and the Lumina. And then there was something also about the Seven of Swords. So look at the Seven of Swords in these two decks. So I believe this is highly illuminated lunar energy for both of these cards, because we have stars here and the ocean is dark in this picture. And there's that really strong element that you can definitely bring in to, to the reading of the Seven of Swords. And then lastly, before I leave you today, I know I wanted to show you the size of the artwork on the Labyrinth Tarot. And here you can see side by side with the Tarot des Zohar, which is a standard size tarot card. And so the card itself is a little bit smaller. And then we have large borders on the top and the bottom. And then here is the Marshmallow Marseille, which is a pocket-sized deck, so more like a poker size. The court cards and the majors are somewhat at a distance, and so you have even smaller illustrations. And so if I place the Marshmallow Marseille on top of the Labyrinth, you can see just, how small this is. So it's important if you're working with this deck that that you know how small the pictures are. It's a little bit like, I suppose, my trimmed Llewellyn Tarot. And here is the Page of Cups in the trimmed Llewellyn. So you can kind of get an idea of the size of the artwork. So I think I'll leave you with that for today, and I will be back very soon with the side-by-side of the Tarot de Maria Celia and the Marshmallow Marseille. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to reading your comments. Stay well, my friends. Namaste.